Hello and welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Welcome to those of you joining me on TV, DAB and online. I'm with you until 4 p.m. this afternoon, lucky not. Today we'll be discussing the Chancellor Rishi Sunak's spring statement, Joe Biden, NFTs, the Oscars, full English breakfasts, and we'll be marking Mother's Day. But first, it's the news with the lovely Bethany Elsie.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. I am Bethany Elsie in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's foreign ministry says all referendums by Russia in occupied territories in Ukraine will have no legal basis. It's after local media reported that the leader of the self-proclaimed Luhansk Republic has said the region could hold a referendum on joining Russia. Ukraine is warning Russia is trying to split the country in two by uniting occupied territories in the east. The chief of Ukraine's military intelligence predicts guerrilla warfare will begin in those areas soon. 2 humanitarian corridors have been agreed for today out of Donetsk and Luhansk to evacuate civilians. Western Ukraine has come under increasing fire recently. The country's interior ministry says Russia has started to target food storage facilities and fuel depots in Lviv. Overnight, 4 missiles hit the city just 40 miles from the Polish border. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked Western countries if they're intimidated by Russia and demanded more military supplies.
Only 1% of all NATO aircraft and 1% of all NATO tanks. 1%. We did not ask for more, and we do not ask for more. We have already been waiting for 31 days. So who is running the Euro-Atlantic community? Is it still Moscow because of threats?
The White House has denied the US president was calling for regime change in Moscow. Joe Biden called Vladimir Putin a butcher and said he cannot remain in power. He made an impassioned speech in Warsaw after meeting with Poland's president and Ukrainian refugees yesterday. The Kremlin has responded, saying the people of Russia, not America, should choose its leader. Margaret Beckett was Britain's first female foreign secretary. She worked under Tony Blair. She told GB News that President Biden is an extremely passionate person.
When I saw that he was in Poland and meeting people who'd come out of Ukraine and hearing their stories and so on, I was positive you get a strong reaction from him. And, you know, when he reacts like that, he says things that perhaps a more guarded person wouldn't say. I do accept, though, that the White House people are right in saying that he's not really talking about regime change. I'm sure he's hoping that people in Russia are thinking about regime change, but that's not the same thing.
In other news, police investigating a hijacking and security alert in Belfast have arrested a man under the Terrorism Act. A woman has also been arrested on suspicion of possessing a firearm in suspicious circumstances. On Friday, Irish Foreign Affairs Minister Simon Coveney had to be evacuated from a peace and reconciliation event in North Belfast due to the alert. Police said a van driver was threatened by 2 gunmen and forced to drive a vehicle which he believed was a live bomb to a church. Some 200,000 children are off school in England due to coronavirus. That's according to the Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi. He said further information about lateral flow tests will be set out on Friday when mass-free testing in England ends. The government says free tests will only be made available to the most vulnerable, but an education union is warning that removing free access when COVID-19 cases are high feels irresponsible. Meanwhile, 600,000 people are being invited for COVID booster jabs next week. It's as infection levels reach near record highs in England, with official figures estimating 1 in 16 people had coronavirus last week. Professor Hugh Pennington, a bacteriologist at the University of Aberdeen, says the virus is unlike any other.
One thing that's absolutely characteristic about all the variants of COVID is the relationship with age. The older you are, the more likely you are to have a hard time, and that's why they're focusing with the booster on people with damaged immune systems, but also and the most important group in terms of numbers are the elderly.
After After 2 years, Gatwick Airport is reopening its south terminal to meet expected strong demand for people going abroad this summer. It was closed in June 2020 to reduce costs during the pandemic. London's Gatwick Chief Executive Officer Stuart Wingate says travelling is now almost back to pre-pandemic levels.
The summer season ahead of us, we're going to start to see more airlines operating at the airport, and we're going to start recovering back towards 2019 passenger levels. There's absolutely no question that there's strong demand. We know that by talking to all of our key airlines. So we call it pent-up demand, people who haven't been able to travel, who really now want to travel.
Liam Gallagher has dedicated a performance to his late friend Taylor Hawkins following the announcement of his death yesterday. The former Oasis frontman was playing a charity concert at the Royal Albert Hall when he sang his final song, Live Forever, in memory of the Foo Fighters drummer. A picture of the rock star, who died on the South American leg of the band's world tour, was displayed on screen throughout the song. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Real Britain with Darren Grimes.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. Here's what's coming up on the show today. The Chancellor Rishi Sunak delivered his spring statement this week. Will his measures actually help struggling Britons cope with the cost of living crisis? I want to hear from you this afternoon. Has he done enough to actually help you out there? In Scrap Reform Keep, this hour we'll be putting North Sea oil and gas production to the test. Is it the solution to our energy crisis, or is it just too harmful for the environment? We'll take a stop at our virtual classroom before 3 o'clock to learn about NFTs. We'll be speaking to one of the founders of the UK's first NFT gallery, which has just opened in London. I'll be taking some notes there, folks. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. I'd love to know your thoughts. As ever, you are more important than my gob. On the spring statement, what did it actually mean for you? Are you pleased? Are you concerned? Tweet me at GBNews or email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can also watch us online on YouTube, and don't forget Facebook, folks. You'll find lots of brilliant content on the GB News page. Cheers very much. Now, I first of all want to ask you what does the Conservative Party actually stand for? It's a question that many of us have been asking over recent times. It used to be led by a belief that the people are big and the state is small. Increasingly, though, it seems that the state cannot do enough. Tories have increased the tax burden to a size not seen since the king of nationalisation, Socialist Clement Attlee, was in number 10. And to be fair to Rishi Sunak, there are clear consequences in starting and stopping the world's economy each time some new coronavirus variant rears its ugly head. There was a clear cost to the lockdown strategy. Not only has it hampered the life chances of the youngest in society, with Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi admitting this morning that the closure of schools was a mistake. His words, not mine, but I couldn't agree more. It created a hell of a lot of hardship for the rest of us, of course. The borrowing for furlough, for support for this business or that business, on the COVID fraud or PPE and vaccines, none of this stuff was debt-free. Nothing in life is free or consequence-free. But we're not all in this together, right? Not if you're in Northern Ireland. To give it its full title, the Conservative and Unionist Party, the Conservative Party, has actually forgotten the importance of the Unionist part of its name. If the Tories aren't there to sort of jealously guard the Act of Union, then who is? But in the Chancellor's spring statement, we heard from the horse's mouth that the scrap of VAT on energy efficiency measures like solar panels, like expensive heat pumps and insulation installation for 5 years, you cannot do the same measures in Northern Ireland. You see, it's de facto inside the EU single market thanks to the Northern Ireland Protocol, which means that they won't be able to enjoy these measures. We'll have to ask the EU very kindly, like Oliver Twist with the bowl asking for more, please, sir. We have to ask if Northern Ireland can please zero rate these solar panels. Is it any wonder that there's a bitter sense of betrayal by the Tories in Northern Ireland? And speaking of these new net zero compatible measures, the idea that it's going to help Shirley and Arthur down the road who are struggling to keep the lights on, it isn't laughable actually, it's offensive. We need gas when all we get is hot air by this government. And make no mistake, right, the energy measures announced, they won't make a jot of difference. I really don't know, hand on heart, how families that are just about managing are going to get through the rest of this year. But hey, right, at least the government are scrapping planning rules for new windmills on your green spaces that you can see from your windows there. And folks, that's not to say that the Labour Party or the Lib Dems, if you remember them, are offering anything better at all. All they seem to have come up with is a proposed one-off windfall tax on the profits of UK oil and gas companies to help a nation struggling to pay its bills. Bills set to rise even further once the price cap is lifted in October of this year. Now, you might think that sounds fair enough, right? Why shouldn't these giants of energy industry give us some of their billions? But all you end up doing there is raising costs to consumers. You prevent any innovation within the industry itself. You prevent thousands of new jobs. And why should any new kid on the block try and challenge the big boys in the energy market if they're going to be whacked by purportedly one-off tax rises every time they make a profit? For me, we'd be chopping off our foot to solve an itch, right? When our economy needs a brand new pair of running trainers and an owner willing to give it the freedom and flexibility to scratch that itch and sprint ahead in the global economic rat race. It isn't just the Conservative Party, I dare say. I think as a nation, we've become a something-for-nothing one. We've forgotten that our ancestors put the great in Great Britain through, yes, good fortune. I think we're a lucky lot in Britain, but also hard work, talent, and actually recognising that these islands are home to great people with a proud past and real chances in the future. Let's not squander them, folks. To continue this discussion, we're going to ask the question, has the Chancellor done enough to help people in our cultural debate? I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Matt Vickers, Conservative MP for Stockton South, and former Conservative MEP Lance Foreman. Now, to the both of you, do you think this budget provided enough support? I'll start with you, Matt.
I think, do you know what? When you see the bills that people are getting, when you see the rise in prices at the petrol pumps, I don't think he could possibly have done enough. I don't think it's possible to do enough. I don't think it's within the gift of government to overturn some of these price increases that we're seeing. And I think, you know what? There was a lot of support there. There's a lot of things that will make a serious difference to people, actually. I don't think people have actually realised how big a difference some of it will make. Whether that be the change in national insurance threshold is actually massive. It's going to put 330 quid in people's pockets. It's huge. And actually, the good thing about it is it's focused, it's targeted on the people who need it most. 70% of the population are going to be paying less in tax than they were at the beginning of that statement.
Matt, the Telegraph have reported that Boris Johnson allegedly wanted more help on energy bills and Rishi Sunak refused. Would you be disappointed to hear that?
Darren, you and I know better than to believe everything we read in the newspapers or see on the television. Particularly, I think the press will always have an angle on everything about somebody who wanted to spend more, somebody who wanted to spend less. This tax cut is the biggest cut to personal tax in a quarter of a century. It is a big deal. Would we like more? Is it going to save everybody from the harm and the pain that they're going to endure from these massive bills that are landing on our doorsteps? No, it isn't. But it's a good start, and it's going to support people in helping them make ends meet.
Lance, it was always going to be the case, wasn't it, that after 2 years, as I say, of switching the economy on and off like a light switch, that Rishi Sunak would have to be straight with the public about the state of our public finances and say to her, look, if you want these health and social care services, for example, you're going to have to pay for them.
What's frustrating, Darren, not just about Rishi Sunak, but pretty much every chancellor, for the last 20 years, is they tinker around at the edges. And we've got to a situation now after 20, 25 years of not grappling with some of the serious fundamental problems that our country faces, of the biggest cost of living crisis we've ever had. And to start knocking off 5p on fuel per litre when people are going to be paying £1,000, £2,000 more per family for their energy, for their electricity, just isn't going to cut it. We need some fundamental long-term changes. We need to deal with energy. We need, I'm not saying just frack, of course, but we need to frack. We need nuclear. We need a diverse energy policy where we, all of those different forms of energy are competing to get on track as quickly as possible. We need a housing policy. We need to reform planning. The biggest cost that particularly young people have in their lives is paying off a mortgage or, trying to get a mortgage or rent. We don't have enough homes in this country. We need to deal with the cost of living. It is a massive problem, and energy and housing are the two biggest issues. And that's what we need to focus on.
Lance, you defected from the Brexit Party as a member of the European Parliament to the Conservatives, and in part, I'm sure, played a role in bringing about Boris Johnson's 2019 majority, the biggest since Thatcher. Do you regret that decision?
Look, I don't regret it. It was definitely the right move at the time. But I think that the government seemed to be missing the point of Brexit. What the British people were saying was that they weren't happy with the way things were being done. They wanted fundamental change. They wanted to take back control, in their words, and they wanted things done differently. We need the private sector to flourish. Rishi Sunak has put up corporation taxes. If businesses can't flourish, and particularly smaller businesses can't flourish, what hope is there for the economy? Why are we punishing them? Why are we punishing them now with increases in national insurance? And the state, the state thinks that it can solve everyone's problems. It's, investing 100 billion in HS2. I'm a free marketer, but even if you're a Keynesian, you only invest in state-funded projects when there's high unemployment. And we don't have high unemployment at the moment. We're competing, the state is competing with the private sector, and it shouldn't be. It should allow the private sector to be flourishing. That's what we need to be doing.
Before I come back to Matt, Lance, I just want you to illustrate for me, because I've had conversations with you in the past about this, just illustrate for me what the as an energy-intensive industry, as you are, you need it to put out your products, how much is the increase in energy costs actually meaning that you're having to say, well, we're going to have fewer sales, we're going to have fewer jobs created, we're going to have, you name it, it's going to be tough.
Absolutely, Darren. Well, this sort of came to my attention last October when my own small business had an increase in electricity costs of £200,000 a year to £400,000 a year. That is absolutely massive. And we're just one small business. And, we've had to put our prices up. But some customers don't like the higher prices, which means we won't be able to make a profit, which means the government won't be able to raise any corporation tax. And none of this needs to happen. It's our mad green energy policy that's doing this. And Boris says now we need to build more wind farms. It hasn't been windy for the last week. It doesn't matter whether you have one wind turbine or a million wind turbines. If the wind doesn't blow, you're not creating energy. We need to have diversity. We need to be fracking. We need to be going to North Sea
Lance,
to get a start.
I totally get you. I hear what you're saying there. I want to put that to Matt. Matt, what do you say to your constituents, right, who are looking at Boris Johnson's plans to scrap planning permission and say, right, you can go hell for leather on these wind turbines? Those wind turbines aren't going to power people's gas boilers, are they?
I think the solution, all of our energy crisis, all of our energy problems is the fact that we've neglected infrastructure for such a long time. Actually, we should be living. Nuclear has such a big role to play, and we turned the taps off on it in recent years. We should actually be going full throttle, and I think the government's got that now. The government has got the idea that we need to start getting into nuclear, that we need to start, this green agenda. Everybody talks about net zero. Actually, we should be talking about energy security. We should be talking about cheaper energy, and the way that comes about, not talking about just whether it's green, it's good. Actually, it's about what we're getting back in return for investing in these green energy projects.
Yeah, exactly. But on that point then, and to go back to some of what Lance was saying, are the Tories really being bold enough, right? If you consider, and I imagine your post bag is pretty full, your emails are coming in thick and fast with constituents saying, Matt, I don't know how I'm going to do this, mate.
I think, you know what, you're entirely right. The price increase that people are paying out on energy, on fuel, is unbelievable, is unbearable. And actually, government doesn't have the answer. Government cannot possibly pay everybody's electricity bill. We've got to do what we can to help people. But I just think, there is a limit. Actually, the other thing that's coming down the line, so we've had this pandemic, it's created a situation where we've got huge national debt. We were paying 13.5 million people's wages. We spent £410 billion in supporting people on that pandemic. It's left us with this huge national debt. The interest payments are projected at £83 billion. You cannot get to a point where you're paying out more on interest than you're paying for schools, for defence. We need to, control the bank balance, the national bank balance, and control that, get that debt down. At the same time, we need to help people in what is a massive crisis. So it's a balancing act. I wish there was more help for people, but I think it's probably what we can do with what we've got.
Correct, though? Do you think your constituents will think that you've got that balance right?
Do you know what? They're seeing these huge bills arriving on their doorsteps, and they know that it's terrible. Can government control what everybody's energy bill is? This is a global problem. It's the world over this issue is occurring. And actually, the other thing that's coming down the line beyond this and beyond the Ukraine issue, we've got a big problem coming with food and drink supply chain, where people are going to be paying more for certain things that they're picking up off supermarket shelves. Ukraine and Russia, one of the biggest exporters of bread, of wheat, of fertilizer. This is the next hit in the cost of living crisis, is food and drink and the cost on our shelves.
Indeed, this debate will rattle on and on and on. Thank you very much, Matt Vickers, Conservative MP for Stockton South, and former Conservative MEP, Lance Foreman. Now, plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Next, I'm delighted to be joined by the economic expert, Kate Andrews, the economics editor at The Spectator. She'll be breaking down the budget for us. But first, let's have a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry for most parts, though cloud is spreading in from the east. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, there will be largely clear skies to the end of the day, although some cloud will linger around south coastal parts. It'll turn cloudier and colder next week. In the southeast, there'll be more cloud around. It should stay dry overnight, but there is a risk of dense fog patches forming. Cloud will spill across parts of Wales this evening. Eastern parts are likely to be cloudier than further west, where there will be still largely clear skies. The cloud will be thick across parts of the Midlands. This is how it will remain through the night, with 1 or 2 showers possible, though the majority of places will remain dry. Whilst there will be some lingering cloud, mist and murk out in the North Sea, away from immediate coastal parts, much of northeastern England will have clear skies to end the day. For eastern parts of Scotland, we'll also have some low cloud affecting coastal parts. Otherwise, there will be barely a cloud in the sky, allowing temperatures to drop at night. Skies will remain largely clear for Northern Ireland as well. It should be dry here, with a few patches of fog and a touch of frost possible in prone spots. Tomorrow, cloud will continue to build as we go through the night, with some dense fog patches in the southeast, and that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Join me, Nana Akweer, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone. We learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 2:26. Now let's continue our breakdown of the spring statement. I'm absolutely delighted to say I'm joined by Kate Andrews, economics editor at The Spectator magazine. Kate, can I start by asking you if you consider that the Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts were something like, I think, 6%, and they've now been slashed to 3.8% this year of economic growth. You can understand, surely, can't you, why the Chancellor is saying to his party, look, folks, this is the state we're in after turning the economy on and off like a light switch for 2 years. If you want tax cuts, if you want greater expenditure on things like defence, post, of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, you're going to have to find a way of paying for it.
Thanks for having me, Darren. I think that slash to the growth forecast is perhaps one of the biggest stories, long-term stories anyway, to come out of this budget. Because the truth is, if you want to bring more revenue in for all the things you just listed, more public spending, more defense spending, the rest of it, for tax cuts, if you want to actually fund your tax cuts, then you have to figure out a way to get more revenue in. And the best and healthiest way to do that for any economy or society is to go for growth. Now, look, 3.8% growth in normal times would be fantastic. But remember, this was supposed to be the COVID comeback financial year. We were supposed to be seeing spectacular growth. So for it to be cut from 6% to 3.8% when this is the year we really want a recovery is very disappointing indeed. And the Treasury can facilitate a lot of the necessary conditions to go for economic growth. But the truth is, if you don't have the health department, the leveling up department, the business department, and at the helm, number 10, bringing in pro-growth policies, there's only so much the Chancellor can do. And, you know, it was a pretty grim set of forecasts that the OBR laid out, not just for growth, but also for people's personal disposable income, for the tax burden, which is going to be going up to a 77-year high in the next few years. Really difficult times, but you have to account for where the money's going to come from, because we have just borrowed like drunken Keynesians for a good solid 2 years, and now we have to account for that money.
Well, exactly, Kate. It's the case, isn't it, that the Tories have basically thrown a massive party during the lockdown strategy, and now the nation is suffering a collective economic hangover.
So I think you can certainly make the case that many of the really expensive schemes, the furlough scheme in particular, has proven itself successful. Unemployment a few years back was expected to peak above 12%. We were looking at chronic, painful unemployment, and it peaked just above 5% and is now back down to its pre-pandemic levels. That is a success of the furlough scheme, but it cost tens and tens of billions of dollars. Pounds. So you have to keep that in mind. And I think perhaps where conservative politicians have gone wrong, and I think the Prime Minister and even possibly the Chancellor are somewhat included in this, is that they acted as if the protection that was given during the COVID years wasn't going to have any kind of economic impact, as if there wasn't going to be a consequence to that. And as you say, Darren, we've been turning the world's economy on and off again for 2 years. It's created serious supply chain crunches, labor shortages. Now, in addition to that, we have these economic sanctions against Russia. These are all the consequences of decisions we've made. And I think you can argue simultaneously that at the time, many of them were the right decisions, but it doesn't mean there isn't a cost to bear from them. We are now paying that cost. But unfortunately, a lot of the public, and the Labour Party is now using this to their advantage, certainly, thinks that the government can shield them from every economic pain. And it simply can't, especially not now. The government does not set global energy prices. They can do what they can to shield people, especially those at the bottom. But at some point, there's going to be a pain attached to these figures. And that's what you saw out of the OBR's forecasts in the spring statement, is that for the next 12 to 18 months, this is actually going to be a very difficult time for the country.
So, Kate, what do you say to the Liberal Democrats and indeed the Labour Party who are saying, well, look, Kate, you've got these energy companies that have made vast profits over recent times. Isn't it right that we have a one-off windfall tax on these big companies and then spend that money shielding the very poorest, the least well-off from these rises in energy bills?
Windfall taxes are hugely damaging for many reasons. I think that there's an ethical problem with them. They basically imply that the assets, the money that a company or an individual has doesn't really belong to them, that the state can come along at any time when it decides it needs more cash and just take it from you. That's a very dangerous principle, and countries around the world that have implemented wealth taxes find that they don't actually raise the money because economic behavior changes, far less comes in than they expected, and they've brought in this terrible principle. So many European countries that have tried wealth taxes and windfall taxes have actually rolled them back. Second of all, when it comes to energy companies in particular, if you are still committed to that net zero agenda and you want to see a greener planet, you want these energy companies investing in green energy. You don't want to be taking their profits. You want them to be redistributing them within the company to move towards green energy. And, I know a lot of people won't like this, but it is a lot of those big oil and gas companies that are also putting a huge amount of money into greener technology. I don't think we want to create incentives against that. And the last thing I would say is that the Labour Party is estimating that a one-off wealth tax could bring in between £1 billion and £3 billion. Now, look, that's no small chunk of change, but in the age of COVID, it is genuinely a drop in the ocean. To put this in perspective, the money that we're paying just to service the debt, just to pay the interest of what we've already borrowed, is going to be £83 billion this year. You compare that to the 1 billion or 3 billion pounds, well, you've put a chunk of change towards servicing the debt. But the Labour Party is starting to act a little bit like the Jeremy Corbyn era, where they would say things like hiking corporation tax is going to pay for countless services that we want. And now it's this windfall tax. It's going to cover the bills of the poor. It's going to shield the poor. Unfortunately, it's not. Even if you were to bring it in, and I think it'd be very damaging for all the reasons I listed, that amount of money is still not going to go anywhere near far enough to actually shield people from these rising costs. So I think overall, it would be a flop, and it would be one that comes with a set of ethical dilemmas that I don't want to go near.
Kate, before I ask you about the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg and Liz Truss wanting tax cuts, reportedly, of course, before I find out your view on that, on them being potentially irresponsible fiscal conservatives, I'm just going to go to a very quick news break and then we'll be right back with you because I'm having such an amazing time. You are so common sense, Kate, that it hurts. It really, really is true. Quick news break and then we'll be back with Kate Andrews, economics editor at The Spectator.
Ukraine is warning Russia is trying to split the country in two by uniting occupied territories in the east. The chief of Ukraine's military intelligence predicts guerrilla warfare will begin in those areas soon. Local media reports the leader of the self-proclaimed Luhansk Republic has said the region could hold a referendum on joining Russia. 2 humanitarian corridors have been agreed for today out of Donetsk and Luhansk to evacuate civilians. The White House has denied the US president was calling for regime change in Moscow. Joe Biden had said Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power and branded him a butcher during his visit to Poland yesterday. In other news, police investigating a hijacking and security alert in Belfast have arrested a 41-year-old man under the Terrorism Act. A woman has also been arrested on suspicion of possessing a firearm in suspicious circumstances. On Friday, Irish Foreign Affairs Minister Simon Coveney was evacuated from a peace and reconciliation event in North Belfast due to the alert. Police said the driver of a van was threatened by 2 gunmen and forced to drive a vehicle which he believed to be a live bomb to a church. Some 200,000 children are off school in England due to coronavirus. That's according to the Education Secretary, who said further information about lateral flow tests will be set out on Friday, when mass-free testing in England ends. An education union is warning, though, that removing free access when COVID-19 cases are high feels irresponsible. And Liam Gallagher has dedicated a performance to his late friend Taylor Hawkins following the announcement of his death yesterday. The former Oasis frontman was playing a charity concert at the Royal Albert Hall when he sang his final song, Live Forever, in memory of the Foo Fighters drummer. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll be back with Real Britain with Darren Grimes after this short break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. I'm delighted to say I'm still joined by Kate Andrews, economics editor at The Spectator magazine. Thank you very much for hanging on there, Kate. Now, Kate, if we're to believe reports that the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg and Liz Truss want tax cuts to tackle the cost of living crisis, the Coffee House Shots podcast, of course, informs us on lots of this. Do you actually view them as being irresponsible fiscal conservatives if they are advocating such a thing?
I desperately want tax cuts. I think there's broad cabinet agreement that tax cuts would be nice. I think you can look at the spring statement and say the Chancellor really wants tax cuts. I took the pledge to cut the basic rate of income tax by 2024 to be actually an indication to his own party that if you stop asking me for so much money, if you stop asking me to spend lots more, then I can deliver this tax cut for you in a few years' time. So I think that was just as much a message to the Tory party as it was to the public. So I think there's a broad consensus that tax cuts would be nice. The question is the timing and what you think you're going to get for them. And if you think that tax cuts are automatically going to lead to more revenue, automatically lead to more economic growth. And by the way, I think certain tax cuts, especially around corporation tax, would be fantastic. But the problem is that you have these calls for tax cuts at the same time when the Prime Minister in particular has wanted more and more spending. I'm thinking particularly of that new plan to fund social care, which basically doesn't add a single bed to the social care system. It just protects the assets of the rich and makes lower paid workers cover them. If you're going to have those kinds of spending calls at the same time that you want to cut taxes, you just have to acknowledge that at some point this isn't sustainable, and it's very hard to do at the same time. So I think it's really a question of priorities and timing. Free marketeers, generally speaking, want tax cuts, and I think the Chancellor really does too. It's just, of course, he's the one who at the end of the day has to not balance the books, but try to think about a time in even the medium term where maybe they could look slightly more balanced. And that means trade-offs. As I was saying before, coming out of the age of COVID, the really difficult conversation to have with the public is you can't have everything.
Yeah, indeed. And I wonder then, in the context of the health and social care tax rises, of course, as you well know, Kate, these hypothecated taxes that people say, they're ring-fenced. We can't spend it on anything other than health and social care or national insurance. Of course, we were all sold a blatant lie that it was unique to paying for pensions and things like that. Do you actually think any future leadership contender to the Conservative Party, of course, it seems like a million years ago now, but it wasn't that long ago that we thought Partygate might actually topple the current incumbent of number 10. How else do you think Tory leadership contenders might actually go about plugging that funding gap that is there as far as health and social care is concerned? Would you like to see a more insurance-based approach?
Well, I would certainly like to see major reform to the National Health Service. It's not sustainable. I think in the next 3 or 4 years, 44% of day-to-day government spending is going to be on healthcare. So you really are getting very close to an NHS with a government attached to it. Of course, I look to other European countries which offer universal access to healthcare, but have very different ways of going about paying for it. So ideally, it doesn't break the government's bank. These are still politically impossible conversations, it seems to have. This Tory government has decided that it only wants to pour more money into the NHS. I'm not convinced that this hypothecated tax is going to work, but I know those who are more supportive of the idea, and I think this is quite optimistic but interesting, think that by creating this new levy, it will link in people's minds the idea that more money for health and social care means a tax rise, that this money for the NHS and social care doesn't grow on trees, it doesn't come out of nowhere magically. If you want more money for these things, you have to raise that levy. But I'm not at all convinced that that will link up in people's minds right away. Moreover, of course, Rishi Sunak has raised the national insurance threshold by nearly £3,000, and this is very good because it's taking the lowest paid it's going to most benefit the lowest paid to help relieve the tax burden on them. But I think that already goes to show that this isn't a hypothecated tax, because we've taken people out of the bracket who would be paying more NI, and yet we're still going to spend the same amount of money on the NHS and social care. So that just goes to show, these things are not directly linked. The government will spend as much money as it wants on health and social care. But I do have sympathy with the idea of trying to tie up in people's minds that connection between your taxes and the NHS, because I think for a long time now, no thanks to the Tory government, which has been piling billions in, really since 2017, I think it was, Theresa May decided to give the NHS a 70th birthday present. This has just been unlimited funds going into a system that remains unreformed. It's not sustainable, but until people want to talk about that, there's very little that can change.
Indeed, Kate, and I think that conversation is quickly coming into focus because, let's be honest, it's not going to get any better any time soon. But Kate Andrews, fantastic analysis there. Thank you very much. Economics editor at the brilliant Spectator magazine. Now, the UK's first NFT gallery has opened in London. It's called Qantas Gallery. So today in our virtual classroom, I want to know, what is an NFT? I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Josh Sandhu, who is the co-founder of Qantas Gallery. Josh, I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times before, so please do forgive me. What is an NFT?
That's more than okay, Darren. Yes, it seems that it's increasing week on week. Everyone's asking about it. To put it in its simplest terms, I'd say NFT is a digital asset that kind of serves as a certificate of authenticity and ownership. So it can be a piece of art, it can be a bit of music or a video, it can even be something like a concert ticket. So all of these digital assets are written on blockchain, which is effectively a digital ledger. So for us in the art industry and as a gallery, the NFT will have a work of art attached to it that's going to kind of say where it's from. So that's going to be the artist, who created it itself, and who owns it. So that being the person who purchased it. And that's kind of what makes it unique. It introduces scarcity because other copies of that picture, they don't have that NFT. And that's kind of what I really love about it all. Actually, it's for the first time in the history of the art market, digital artists have been able to enter it and all of these different mediums. So that's kind of the long and short of what an NFT is.
Yes. How are the prices for these digital NFTs actually? How does the market decide, I guess, what a priceless piece of digital NFT is?
Yeah. A lot of it is hype driven in some projects, but then you have kind of like the traditional sector entering the space. So people like Damien Hirst, a household name, obviously blue chip artist. So in terms of value and how we assign that, it depends project to project. Some people are investors and kind of analyze the market more like a stock. Other people, collectors, they see a piece just like they would in a traditional gallery, and they'll buy it for whatever that price is or whatever they feel like it's worth. So it just depends, really.
Yeah. So if, say, I wanted to take the GBNews logo and get however much I could possibly get from selling that as an NFT, and I'm just say to my employer and producer, I'm not going to do that, please don't panic. How would I actually go about doing that? Does it cost anything for a seller who owns a piece of artwork to actually upload it to blockchain? I'm saying upload it to blockchain. I have absolutely no idea what I am talking about. I want to be absolutely clear on that. But is that how it works? You upload it to something and therefore it goes out to the marketplace?
Yeah, effectively, in a similar process to how you upload a photo to Instagram, a lot of these marketplaces keep things as simple as possible. So that process is called minting, that uploading and writing it onto the blockchain. That's the term that is used. But it is very, very simple process, uploading a picture, video, whatever it is, and then giving it a title and a price. And so long as you have permission, so in this case, you definitely need to get your bosses for that GB News logo. You can, it's super simple. You can do it in a couple of minutes, really.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, I was just about to say that that's a very white background behind you there, but of course, all of your artwork is digital.
Yes, yeah.
So Qantas Gallery, how do you display your things at the gallery?
So Qantas Gallery, it depends. So for our opening, which we just had on Wednesday, which was a roaring success, I'm happy to say, we had a lot of screens, digital screens, Samsung frames. So that's what was displaying kind of the NFTs. So what you're seeing there is the advisory office, the arm of the business, who their job is kind of to advise people, educate them. But in terms of the gallery space itself, lots and lots of screens, looks like a traditional gallery, but then we have like traditional works as well. So some of our artists come from that background, and they're entering this space, the NFT space. So it's not solely digital works. You buy an NFT with some of our artists, like Blunt Roller or Stoney, or Glenn Fox, who you get skateboards that he's done his artwork on. And the NFT version of that comes with the actual physical, tangible painting. So it just depends.
Yeah, it's quite clever. Josh, thank you very much for shining a light on that, and best of luck with the gallery as well. That's Josh Sandew, co-founder of Qantas Gallery, which just had its opening last week. It's now 2:49 and time for scrap, reform or keep. Now, on this segment, of course, we take something and put it through its paces and decide whether or not we should scrap, reform or keep it. And today, I'm delighted to say, we're discussing North Sea oil and gas production. Joining me now is Neil Rothney, a retired offshore oil and gas worker, who is speaking to us from Glasgow this afternoon. Hey, Neil, I tell you what, being a proponent of North Sea oil and gas in Glasgow at the minute mustn't make you very popular.
Being an opponent of it? Well, I think that most people in Glasgow are very, very aware of the climate crisis. They may not be up to date with every single statistic, but they know that the days of oil and gas are long gone. And just to be clear about this, Just Stop Oil are making the demand that there is no new oil and gas licenses, that we don't develop any more oil and gas.
Yeah, the government are actually saying, though, Neil, aren't they, that the plans to increase oil and gas production, especially utilising our own domestic sources, are actually about bringing down these spiralling power prices. Now, I've been to Glasgow many times, Neil, and I know for a fact it's not a place that's, awash with wealth. Wouldn't this help struggling Glaswegians?
Oh, on the contrary. I mean, we've had in the last few months, we've had an enormous rise in domestic fuel bills, and they're due to go much higher. This is nothing to do with increased production costs in the North Sea. This is pure profit-taking by an industry which has got absolutely no concern for either the workers in the industry or for the consumers of their product.
Well, hang on, though. These are companies would turn around and they would say, look, the likes of BP, the likes of Shell, you name it, they're all saying we're investing in the future of the energy market, which is more renewable, net-focused energy sources.
The real situation that exists just now is that if we continue to produce hydrocarbons the way we're doing it, the climate crisis is going to develop past a point where we can actually live on the planet. So whatever the government are saying, whatever green spin the oil companies are putting on this, it's very, very clear to people like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I mean, these are not radicals. These are, government-sanctioned scientists. It's very clear to them that if you do not begin to stop producing fossil fuels now, then it's going to be too late for the future of most people on the planet. Here, in Scotland or in the UK, the main source of the fossil fuel pollution is the North Sea. And that North Sea has got to be curtailed. It's got to be stopped. There's the prices that we're paying, the hugely inflated prices that 1 million new people are going to be driven into poverty through. That's according to Martin Lewis.
Neil, I'll tell you what, though. I think there are communities up and down this country that know a thing or two about poverty, and actually energy insecurity in this country is a great source of that poverty.
Exactly. But the insecurity has been driven by North Sea oil. It's expensive. It's expensive. And the prices are being driven up by speculation. There's been no increase in production costs for North Sea oil.
Because people like you keep campaigning against the energy sources that we know work. We need to use gas, for example, as a transition to get to the kind of country that I assume you and I want to see. I'm afraid to say, Neil, that I think you're living in a sort of Panglossian fancy land here, where we've got a land of milk and honey coming down the track, when actually people are struggling right now, and the only way we can plug that gap is through gas.
No, the exact opposite is the case. The gas that people are forced to buy, the gas that's pumped into their homes, is hugely inflated in price. This is renewable energy is cheaper than gas. It's quicker to bring on stream and it's cheaper. I mean, you can argue with me, but you really need to argue with the International Energy Agency. I mean, they're saying, look, if governments are serious about climate crisis, there can be no new investments in oil and gas or coal from now on. That's unequivocal. It's not me saying it. It's not Just Stop Oil saying it. It's the International Energy Agency.
So, Neil, I'm assuming then, as far as scrap reform keeps concerned, you are saying a resounding scrap to oil, North Sea oil and gas.
To be replaced by a massive expansion of renewables. To be replaced
and to politely say I disagree, and I actually think that, one, it's a great source of economic opportunity for people in Scotland, and two, it would ensure that households that are really hard-pressed right now actually are able to keep heating their homes. But Neil, thank you very much.
You haven't said anything that convinced me that you know what
oil and gas worker there with his view. Now, to finish this hour, let's have a campus clash. While William and Kate have been on their Royal Caribbean tour, Jamaica have been calling for Britain to pay for reparations for our colonial past, sparking debate and much controversy. So do you think Britain should pay reparations for our colonial past? I certainly know what I think. But joining me to debate this are Anna McGovern, an English student from Queen Mary University of London, and Jude Lavos, a prospective politics and international relations student who joins us from Bournemouth. Now, I'll start with you, Jude. Do you think that actually Britain should be paying these reparations for our colonial past? Is this a way of sort of making amends for the past?
I think so, yeah. And it's not about, guilt that we should feel because, we weren't alive back then. We didn't do those things. But it's sort of acknowledging the history that we do have and the fact that a lot of these countries were made worse off after being enslaved and pillaged and all that sort of stuff. We should go back and make amends for the damage that our ancestors may have done and that we today benefit from. Schools and roads and so many things that we take for granted have been paid for by this money. 1 in 5 of people in the 1900s, a lot of their wealth came from colonialism. And as we know, wealth is generational. So
right, yes, but at the same
it's all about
time,
making
though,
amends.
I totally hear what you're saying, but at the same time, Britain was, of course, the first to actually go out of its way to abolish and campaign for slavery. We actually gave a lot of our GDP and a lot of our naval superpower at the time, to force other countries to give up the abhorrent trade as well. Do we not deserve some credit for that?
Of course, there is credit to be taken when it comes to abolishing slavery, but this is looking at countries that were enslaved for hundreds of years by the British. It was through bloody revolutions and lots of campaigning that this slavery was undone. It was not a case of we all just sort of decided collectively, hey, slavery's bad. It was more of a case of these people have been campaigning and have been enslaved for hundreds of years by the British. It was a case, it wasn't, Britain was the world leader. Yes, they abolished it first in comparison to a lot of other empires at the time, but we still have to acknowledge we were enslaving them for hundreds of years before that, and the democracy that they experience now is a result of them becoming free from that.
I want to let you get a point in there. Anna, we stopped paying for the slave trade in 2015, right? We stopped funding our debts, essentially. Do you not think, especially given we know that this country is one of the most diverse in the world, we know that this country enjoys fantastic race relations, we know that in this country we have descendants of people who were put through the abhorrent slave trade practices, they would now, as British taxpayers, descendants of former slaves, would have to hand over their hard-earned money to pay for people who now live in democratic countries, ancestors of those of the slave trade, just like them. Isn't that perverse?
I think you made a really interesting point at the beginning, because the really important thing to recognise is that the British Empire was the one that ended the slave trade with the Abolition Act in 1833. We had 40% of our national budget, with that equating to 40 million, to go towards this, which we were paying until 2015. And technically, we're still paying this back right now in tax. So I think to say that we, in modern day society should be carrying this and should be paying reparations, I think is the wrong answer, really, because I think we should learn from our mistakes, and I think we all recognise that slavery is an abhorrent thing that ever happened in our modern day society. But we should not be carrying this debt to in the modern day world. We should learn from our mistakes.
Hey, I couldn't have put it better myself. That was Jude Lavos, a prospective politics and international relations student, and Anna McGovern, an English student from Queen Mary University of London. Now you're watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. I'm with you for another hour, you lucky lot. But first, let's take a quick break, shall we?
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to those of you joining me on TV, DAB and online. This is Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. In the next hour, we'll have more reaction to the spring statement. We'll have a preview of the Oscars and we'll discuss Save the Children rejecting a hefty donation. But first, it's the news with Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's 3:03. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's foreign ministry says all referendums by Russia in occupied territories in Ukraine will have no legal basis. It's after local media reported that the leader of the self-proclaimed Luhansk Republic has said the region could hold a referendum on joining Russia. Ukraine is warning Russia is trying to split the country in two by uniting occupied territories in the east. The chief of Ukraine's military intelligence predicts guerrilla warfare will begin in those areas soon. 2 humanitarian corridors have been agreed for today out of Donetsk and Luhansk to evacuate civilians. The US envoy to NATO says around 2/3 of the NATO alliance are now providing lethal assistance to Ukraine. Ukraine says Russia has started to target food storage facilities and fuel depots in the western city of Lviv. Overnight, 4 missiles hit the city just 40 miles from the Polish border. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked Western countries if they're intimidated by Russia and demanded more military supplies.
Only 1% of all NATO aircraft and 1% of all NATO tanks. 1%. We did not ask for more, and we do not ask for more. We have already been waiting for 31 days. So who is running the Euro-Atlantic community? Is it still Moscow because of threats?
The White House has denied the US president was calling for regime change in Moscow. Joe Biden called Vladimir Putin a butcher and said he cannot remain in power. He made an impassioned speech in Warsaw after meeting with Poland's president and Ukrainian refugees yesterday. The Kremlin has responded, saying the people of Russia, not America, should choose its leader. Margaret Beckett, Britain's first female foreign secretary who worked under Tony Blair, told GB News that President Biden is an extremely passionate person.
When I saw that he was in Poland and meeting people who'd come out of Ukraine and hearing their stories and so on, I was positive you get a strong reaction from him. And, you know, when he reacts like that, he says things that perhaps a more guarded person wouldn't say. I do accept, though, that the White House people are right in saying that he's not really talking about regime change. I'm sure he's hoping that people in Russia are thinking about regime change, but that's not the same thing.
In other news, police investigating a hijacking and security alert in Belfast have arrested a man under the Terrorism Act. A woman has also been arrested on suspicion of possessing a firearm in suspicious circumstances. On Friday, Irish Foreign Affairs Minister Simon Coveney had to be evacuated from a peace and reconciliation event in North Belfast due to the alert. Police said a van driver was threatened by two gunmen and forced to drive a device which he believed was a live bomb to a church. Some 200,000 children are off school in England due to coronavirus. That's according to the Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi, who said further information about lateral flow tests will be set out on Friday, when mass free testing in England ends. The government says free tests will only be made available to the most vulnerable. But education unions are warning that removing free access when COVID-19 cases are high feels irresponsible. The school week must be at least 32.5 hours long for everyone from next year in September. That's under levelling up plans in the government's new schools white paper, which will be published tomorrow. The Department for Education says some pupils are missing out on around 2 weeks' worth of schooling every year.
We've got a real problem, so I hope tomorrow, when the government are going to announce further plans for the reform of education, there's going to be a bit more in that what's called a white paper than just adding 20 minutes to the school day for some schools. We are letting down a lot of young people, and we've got to prepare for the future. We're not going to do it by fiddling around with the school day for a small number of schools. We've got a giant Everest to climb.
After 2 years, Gatwick Airport is reopening its south terminal to meet expected strong demand for people going abroad this summer. It was closed in June 2020 to reduce costs during the pandemic. London Gatwick's Chief Executive Officer, Stuart Wingate, says travelling is now almost back to pre-pandemic levels.
The summer season ahead of us, we're going to start to see more airlines operating at the airport, and we're going to start recovering back towards 2019 passenger levels. There's absolutely no question that there's strong demand. We know that by talking to all of our key airlines. So we call it pent-up demand, people who haven't been able to travel, who really now want to travel.
Liam Gallagher has dedicated a performance to his late friend Taylor Hawkins following the announcement of his death yesterday. The former Oasis frontman was playing a charity concert at the Royal Albert Hall when he sang his final song, Live Forever, in memory of the Foo Fighters drummer. A picture of the rock star, who died on the South American leg of the band's world tour, was displayed on screen throughout the song. Taylor Hawkins died at the age of 50. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Real Britain with Darren Grimes.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up on the show. The Oscars are taking place in the early hours of Monday morning, but But now the Academy is set to disqualify movies that don't have enough black, gay and disabled actors. By 2024, we'll be crossing over to the USA to speak to a reporter gearing up for the awards ceremony. The charity Save the Children has turned down a whopping £750,000 donation from a company involved in fossil fuels. You know, the things that are powering you and I's homes. Was this virtue signalling, or do you agree with their move? Is this the sort of action that we need to take to actually bring about change in our reliance on fossil fuels? And we'll be getting reaction to Joe Biden's comments while speaking in Poland yesterday. It got a pretty strong response from the Kremlin. That's what we're talking about for the next hour, but please keep your thoughts coming in on the spring statement. Has enough been done to support those who are struggling? Tweet me at GBNews, or you can email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch us online too on YouTube, and don't forget Facebook. You'll find lots of brilliant content on our page there. Thank you very much. The time is 3:10. Now let's hear some real voices. We've asked people in the West Midlands, has enough been done to tackle the cost of living crisis in the Chancellor's spring statement?
But it's the people that are hard up. The cost of gas and electricity is crippling people. Some people can't eat through it. I mean, I'm a pensioner, and I think I was paying about 55. I think mine's gone up to 95 a month, and they wanted even more than that.
Everything's going up, but my money don't go up. I still just get a pension off the government. I get £200 a week off the government. But I've got to pay electric, gas, rates, council tax, insurance.
I don't think they're going in the right direction in that the people they need to be helping, they aren't directly helping. You know, I mean, I personally don't need particularly helping. People above me don't need helping, but people at the lower level definitely need helping. And what he announced yesterday doesn't dramatically help them, you know, not significantly.
I think those that are on very low incomes, not enough at all. I really feel sorry for them.
I think, but the government, as their moral responsibility, they still have things to do that can help minimize the bills to the citizens also, because you look at the income to the citizen and see if really the income is enough to drive those bills. The bills are quite high. The water usage, lighting, gas, and another bill. So, yes, I think.
People in Stratford-upon-Avon there giving us their thoughts on Rishi Sunak's spring statement. Now, one guy whose thoughts I'm very keen to get on the spring statement, and one of the talking points that actually came out of it, was the lack of support that Rishi Sunak was prepared to offer to more energy-intensive sectors. We had Lance Foreman on earlier giving us a little insight into what that's like. But how do we actually go about providing security and backing to an industry as energy intensive as the steel industry? Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by Simon Boyd, Managing Director of Reed Steel, a steel manufacturer based in Christchurch. Thank you very much for your company, Simon. Simon, what did you actually make of this budget? Were you tearing your hair out saying, what are you doing, man?
Well, I was tearing what's left of it out. I think I'd torn the first half out during COVID and the rest out after Mr. Sunak's speech. I was really disappointed. You know, I mean, the steel industry has suffered considerably over the last couple of decades. And while there's some good news from steel, the result of COVID meant that a lot of people further downstream, like ourselves, like our company, you know, we are suffering massive price increases in steel, primarily because of COVID, and then that has just been exacerbated by the situation in Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think this spring statement means for the steel industry? Do you reckon we're actually going to continue to have one in this country? Do you think it's all part of a plot to actually say, well, look, we're a services-based economy, we're going for net zero, so to hell with industries like the steel industry, which I think is a massive mistake, by the way, Simon, because what do they think builds those great big whopping windmills?
Well, this is what Brexit was all about, really. It was about steel making and manufacturing jobs in the UK, along with a lot of other industry-heavy sectors. And, I've been a great promoter of British Steel. We were the first company to sign up to the Steel Charter, where we try to use everything that's been made actually in the UK for our domestic work and as well as our export work. And what the Chancellor has failed to understand is that the majority of businesses that are the customer of British Steel are small and medium-sized businesses. And, to go ahead with a national insurance increase when all SMEs, which are the backbone of the British economy, make up for most employment in the UK, are already reeling from the effects of COVID, and we're just starting to come out of it, to increase taxes is the last thing that you want to do. If you want to do more for people down the food chain, so to speak, and I don't really like that term, but if you look at the working man and women, what they need to do is get higher paid jobs. And the way to generate higher paid jobs is to increase productivity. That was the point of Brexit. We're seeing lots of growth worldwide starting to come back again. And SMEs, they're embedded into the local community, pay their taxes, but their voice is very rarely heard. And, if you cut taxes, you would get a much bigger return on your investment.
Well, Simon, hopefully the Chancellor's watching and taking notes from you, because, I think you're absolutely, not just Reed Steel, but a whole host of industries are just crying out for a little bit of help during these extraordinary times. Big employers as well. Simon Boyd, Managing Director of Reed Steel, thank you very much for your time. Now, folks, the 94th Oscars takes place tonight. Could you care? I'm not sure I could. But anyway, the ceremony is taking place in Hollywood, where Wackery and Wokery lives, and it hasn't been without controversy. In recent years, my next guest, Sandro Monetti, thinks that the awards ceremony needs a complete overhaul. Now, this comes as the Academy is set, as I said earlier, to disqualify movies that don't have enough black, gay and disabled actors by 2024. Come on, the Oscars are just a sinking ship here, aren't they? What actually needs to be changed to make them more appealing to the general public? Sandro, fill me in, Editor-in-Chief of Hollywood International Filmmaker magazine. Fill me in. What would you do were it to be in my gift to say, right, I'm putting you in charge? What would be the first thing that you would do, Sandro?
Well, firstly, I would congratulate you on an excellent decision. And it is time for change, because the Oscars are facing something of an existential crisis. The ratings have gone off a cliff. The membership is in open revolt about various changes. But the real problem is, after 94 years of Oscar, are they really going to make it to 100 without big change? And it's the connection that has been lost between movie insiders and voters and the general public, because it used to be, up until 20 years ago, that popular films were nominated for Oscars. Things like Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Rocky, these kind of things were always at the Oscars. But ever since the last Lord of the Rings film about 20 years ago, it has been much more sort of independent, lesser seen movies. The Academy seems to think that popularity is a dirty word. And so I think the main change needs to be that just because something is popular with the public doesn't mean it doesn't have artistic merit. It's got to be a change of mindset.
Right, I see, yes. I mean, that's very interesting, Sandro. But basically, if you want to go far in the film industry now, if you want to actually be part of an award-winning production, you've got to be a black, trans, homosexual, or is it pansgender? I don't know. Whatever sort of woke, trendy, new gender or sexuality there is out there at the moment, you didn't stand a chance if you're cisgender, straight, and white, basically, do you?
You know, diversity isn't just Hollywood's problem, it's society's problem, but Hollywood has a big influence on popular culture and culture around the world. And for many years, it's just been lip service, but now Hollywood is actually putting it in the rules. So these new rules will come into effect in 2024. It's an admirable effort, but how it's going to work, we will see. Yes, the rules are that one of the leading actors in the movie must be from an underrepresented group. There also must be similar changes behind the camera as well, with directors, producers, these significant roles. But it's interesting that Hollywood has already sort of taken effect, because most of this year's Best Picture nominees would already qualify. So yes, but the Academy had a real problem to address here, because back in 2015, I remember reporting that there were all 20 acting nominees were white, and that really made the Academy start to try and change the numbers and in effect to change the industry. And admirably, over the last 5 years, they have doubled the membership among women and people of colour, and they're not stopping there. So it is a radical overhaul, but whether they can overhaul the Oscars to actually bring the viewers with them is, I would suggest, a bigger challenge, because ratings were 10 million last year, all-time low.
Yeah, I mean, Sandra, though, I think a lot of people watching will be saying, I think what you've just said is very laudable, and I respect the aims and objectives of the award ceremonies to try and bring more people on board and give them a chance to win awards and things like that. But is there not an element of, will black people, will gay people, will, I don't know, transgender people not be watching themselves receive these awards and thinking and wondering, have I received this because of my immutable characteristics? Aren't we at risk here of making people feel that they're basically only there because of the fact that they have this identity box ticked?
It's interesting. People tend to watch the films and relate to the films and vote for the films that they watch. And you may have seen that in the nominations this year, they're a lot more diverse. And I think that becomes a result of changing the membership. So yeah, I mean, this is all about changing the profile of the membership and then changing the awards as well. So yes, and the Academy Museum has recently opened, and that puts diversity very much at the forefront. So this is Hollywood's issue at the moment. Hollywood and the Oscars has always been politically based, culturally aware. You only need to look at what Sean Penn has said in the last 24 hours. He thinks the Oscars should all be about Ukraine and Zelensky. And if Zelensky is not introducing the Oscars, Sean Penn says he's going to come back to Hollywood and destroy his awards. So whatever is in the cultural conversation, the Oscars tends to be either the leader or the punching bag. It's struggling to make friends. It's making a lot of enemies. It continues to be a fascinating
Sandro,
event.
I imagine most people watching this are just thinking, look, I just want to hear about the films, right? I don't want to hear about the politics. But Sandro Manetti, I hope you have an absolutely fantastic night tonight. Editor-in-Chief of Hollywood International Filmmaker magazine. Plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Next, we'll be looking into the charity Save the Children. They refused a donation of 750,000 quid from Neptune Energy. But first, let's have a little look at that weather.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone. We learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question. Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking dry with a good deal of sunshine, although cloud will continue to affect some areas. Let's take a look at the details. The south coast of Devon and Cornwall will see patchy cloud at times, but most of southwest England will have wall-to-wall sunshine. It'll become pleasantly warm there. There'll still be areas of low cloud affecting the southeast, keeping it cooler than of late, although the cloud should break at times to give some brighter spells. Eastern parts of Wales will also see some cloud, but elsewhere across the country, a good deal of sunshine is expected. The northwest of England will also see a little cloud coming and going, but in the sunnier spells, temperatures will climb into the mid to high teens, which is above the late March average. Patchy cloud shouldn't spoil conditions too much across the northeast of England, and with light winds here, it'll feel reasonably warm. Southern and eastern Scotland will have some cloud, but the majority of the country will be bathed with plenty of early spring sunshine, top temperatures around 17 to 18 degrees. The north and west of Northern Ireland could see some cloud during the afternoon, but a dry and fairly sunny second half to the day is likely. It'll remain dry everywhere this evening, with the clearer skies reserved for the northwest and far south. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company. Now, Save the Children, folks, has turned down a £750,000 donation from Neptune Energy. The charity have said that it's changed its policy to stop taking donations from fossil fuel companies. Well, The children around the world must be totally safe, mustn't they? If they can turn round and say they don't want £750,000. How extraordinary. I'm joined by Dr. Judith Anderson now, who is chair of Climate Change Psychology Alliance. Judith, whilst they can say they care more about sustainable energy, some will say, actually, hang on a minute. What's more important right now is sustaining children's lives no less than the children of Ukraine.
Well, I think this is a great discussion for Mother's Day, Darren. Thank you for inviting me. It's a very complicated question, and I think there are a number of things to think about. This is not just about sustainable energy. It's about the massive impact that climate change is having now on many populations in the world, particularly the poorest. Now, in Africa, for example, 40% of the whole population are 15 and under. Globally, it's 25%. So when we think about the impacts of heat stress, floods, drought, reduced food production, we're thinking about a lot of children being affected. So there are a number of questions. What are the causes of climate change? And we know that they're predominantly fossil fuel consumption, and fossil fuel consumption historically from the wealthier countries, including our own. Did the fossil fuel companies know about climate change? They did. They had some great scientists who in the 80s predicted the temperature rises that we're seeing now and the overall effect.
Judith, I hear what you're saying. But people throughout, for a long time now, have been making similar projections. I mean, there were projections made in the 60s, for example. And now, of course, we found that there haven't been the massive changes, that world-ending, indeed, that they said would be brought about.
Where are you getting your information from, Darren? I've been looking today at the IPCC Impact Assessment Report, which was published in February this year, which was signed off by every country in the whole world. And that is looking at increasing risks to young people. Well, it's looking at risks for all of us, but there's a particular chapter focusing on risk. And we also have to think about the way that fossil fuel companies have very sadly, not all of them, but some, have funded climate change denial, which has led to a delay in us acting.
Judith, I regretfully say that I have never been funded by fossil fuel companies, but if any want to get in touch, I'll give them my sort code and account number. But Judith, look, I actually believe that what you are advocating here, as far as getting rid of fossil fuels altogether, surely children around the globe, some of the most deprived countries around the world, are going to be left cold and they're going to be left hungry because of the policies that you're advocating.
That's a misinterpretation of what I've said, Darren.
Well, how?
Absolute misinterpretation of what I've said. I think our own Climate Change Committee has given very clear guidance to the government of how we could reduce our use of fossil fuels much faster, and the government hasn't acted. Fossil fuel companies are in an extraordinarily difficult position because they're beholden, of course, to their shareholders, and they're not getting the benefits of tax breaks on renewables. They're still getting the tax breaks on their extraction of fossil fuels. So in a way, they're as much a victim of our own denial as they are. But what I'm talking about is that this is a massive problem for children. And let me tell you, children all over the world are very worried that governments are not taking them seriously.
And let me tell you, Judith, the reason why working class communities like that one that I'm from, the reason why we get beyond child age now is because we're not dying, and thanks to the progress that largely fossil fuels have brought about. But we'll agree to disagree.
Of course,
Judith Anderson, Chair of Climate Change Psychology Alliance, thank you very much for your time. You're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. Before 4 p.m, we'll get the latest reaction to the US President's comments in Poland, and I'll be joined by a very special woman shortly. Now it's time for a check on those news headlines with the lovely Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's 33 minutes past 3. Ukraine's military intelligence says Russia wants to split the country in two by uniting occupied territories in the east. Its foreign ministry says all referendums by Russia in occupied territories in Ukraine will have no legal basis after the head of the self-proclaimed Luhansk Republic said the region may hold a referendum on joining Russia. The White House has denied the US president was calling for regime change in Moscow. Joe Biden had said Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power and branded him a butcher during his visit to Poland yesterday. In other news, police investigating a hijacking and security alert in Belfast have arrested a 41-year-old man under the Terrorism Act. A 38-year-old woman has also been arrested on suspicion of possessing a firearm in suspicious circumstances. On Friday, Irish Foreign Affairs Minister Simon Coveney was evacuated from a peace and reconciliation event in North Belfast due to the alert. Police said the driver of a van was threatened by two gunmen and forced to drive a vehicle which he believed to be a live bomb to a church. Some 200,000 children are off school in England due to coronavirus. That's according to the Education Secretary, who said further information about lateral flow tests will be set out on Friday, when mass-free testing in England ends. An education union is warning removing free access when COVID-19 cases are high feels irresponsible. And Liam Gallagher has dedicated a performance to his late friend Taylor Hawkins following the announcement of his death yesterday. The former Oasis frontman was playing a charity concert at the Royal Albert Hall when he sang his final song, Live Forever, in memory of the Foo Fighters drummer. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll be back with Real Britain with Darren Grimes after this short break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. Now, Lord Grade, the TV executive, businessman and former BBC chairman, has been chosen as the new chairman of UK media regulator Ofcom. So today, in our Back to Basics virtual classroom, we're going to explore what the Ofcom chairman actually does. I'm joined by no one better to clear up this for us than Martin Campbell. He is a media advisor at Media Objectives and former chief advisor to Ofcom. First of all, can I just ask, could you explain, shine some light on what Ofcom is ultimately and what some of their rules are?
Yeah, hi, Darren. Yes, Ofcom was set up a few years back, really as a very sort of Blairite organisation, and it was set up to be a communications regulator and effectively competitions authority for television and radio, for communications, as landlines, broadband speed, that sort of stuff, and was also given the postal service to look after as well. So it's actually quite a wide-ranging remit that they have, but the emphasis is always on broadcasting for obvious reasons, and of course the Michael Grade situation has highlighted this.
Why do you think the Tories have gone with Michael Grade? Why? Of course, there is a real pushback, isn't there, against some of, as you rightly say, some of these regulators set up by Tony Blair. A lot of Conservatives are saying, well, hang on a minute, I think we should roll back some of these regulatory state-like issues. Do you think they've gone with Lord Grade because they think Lord Grade is a man for them?
Yes. I mean, you've got to go back actually to have a look at when David Cameron was elected as Prime Minister. One of the things he said was, one of the first things I will do is to have a bonfire of quangos, and I shall put Ofcom on the top of that bonfire. Well, it was only a matter of weeks before there was a big media storm, which I think was probably the Murdoch. The phone hacking. And so, all of a sudden it was hauled off the bonfire of quangos because the government desperately need something between them and broadcasting, because otherwise they can find themselves being very unpopular. The difficulty that has happened over the years really began as much with Theresa May as anybody else when she stood up in Parliament and said, yeah, I have instructed Ofcom to find reasons to close down Russia Today. Okay, now without going into the moral aspect of that, the fact of the matter is Ofcom is not an arm of the government. It's supposedly independent. It's a creature of statute, but it's supposedly independent of the government. And that brought it uncomfortably close to the government. And once again, with RT and Liz Truss, that's brought it very close to the government again. So, as the years go by, it's looking more and more like a tool of government. So I'm not entirely surprised at Lord Grade's announcement, although it's caused quite a fuss. They did want Paul Dacre from the Mail, they did want Charles Moore from the Telegraph.
Well, indeed.
But they were booted out by selection committees, yeah.
Yeah, so earlier this year, Grade was warning that the BBC's £159 licence fee was too much money and suggesting that the corporation should close channels maybe to cut their costs. Will he be allowed to make such statements as the chairman of Ofcom?
Yeah. The different chairmen that Ofcom have behaved in lots of different ways, Darren. So most of them, actually, from Lord Curry, who was the first chairman, have been quite quiet, and he cut a more sort of avuncular figure than anything else, and at meetings. Oh, he's a very high-powered, very clever man, but he didn't court the media. With Michael Grade, of course, he's inextricably linked with the media. So I suspect if he does get the job, and he still is to see the DCAMS committee next week, who could, in theory, stop the appointment, but I very much doubt if they will. That they could stop it, but it's caused the industry a little bit of a problem because Lord Grade's views are quite well known. I agree with most of them. I think the BBC wastes money like Topsy and should be actually sort of blown up and stopped.
Martin, though, I bet, 3-day-a-week job, right, with a hefty salary of around 142,000 quid. I wouldn't mind the job myself, I'll tell you that much.
Well, but you see, have you got the experience? Now, the interesting thing about Michael Grade is that because he's 79, And I think he's headed BBC ITV 4 and 5.
Yes, he's been around. He's been around, Martin. I think that's safe to say. Martin Campbell there, thank you very much for your time. That's Martin Campbell, Media Advisor at Media Objectives and former Chief Advisor to Ofcom. Now, folks, it's 2:43 and it's time for Scrap Reform Keep. This was a study that shocked me to the core this week, and it was about the full English breakfast. Apparently, we're shunning the fry-up for smashed avocado, veggie sausages, and plant-based milk. I'm joined now by Matt Thanthorpe, Culinary Director at Various Eateries Limited. Now, Matt, how are you? Come on, you cannot beat a full English, can you? What's on your plate, mate?
Hi, Darren. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm a full English man all the way myself. I would say once a week, a full English. But look, in all seriousness, there has in the last sort of 5 years been a change in eating trends, well, and longer, obviously, but in the last 5 years, significantly around plant-based foods, plant-based milks. And I've noticed definitely a change in eating habits for people around breakfast. I mean, in our restaurants, the full English is still the king. It takes 40% of our sales, I'd say, which is way more than anything else near it. But avocado and eggs is coming up fast in second place and is hugely popular, driven by vegetarianism and obviously, you know, make it vegan without the eggs.
I mean, Matt, come on. You can't tell me. The British people, right, we quite like a drink. And I cannot imagine being hungover and opting instead for avocado and egg over a proper full English.
I'm with you.
Look at that. I mean, on screen for radio listeners, you can see a beautiful plate of full English there with people tucking in their hearts and bellies content. I mean, what more could you want?
Look, in 10 years' time, the full English will still be the go-to for this country. It's never going away. It's been with us for decades, if not hundreds of years. It's synonymous with people coming over from abroad to eat in the UK. They love an English breakfast. We have the best sausages. We have the best bacon. Our black pudding is second to none. I agree. You know, avocado and eggs, maybe you take that if you're feeling a little bit healthier, if you're hungover. I'm always going to go for a full English. I agree with you. But there is definitely a change. I would say there is a change in trend. And that is not... Sorry, go on.
As far as this trend is concerned, Matt, I was just going to say, do you think this is down to certainly younger demographics who've been brought up of the view that the planet needs urgent help? Do you think this is down to environmental concerns?
I think it's down to a lifestyle concern. I think there is some environmental concern. I mean, I don't know the impact on avocado farming on the planet and how, you know, the number of avocados that come to this country, because we don't grow them. They're not very green. I mean, you know, obviously in colour they are, but I don't think an avocado is particularly, I don't know what the carbon footprint is for getting them here. But listen, it is definitely down to lifestyle, down to awareness about health. And, you know, we've seen veganism is becoming hugely popular. Vegetarianism is really popular. But at the end of the day, Darren, people will still come back for the full English.
Yeah, so Matt, I'm assuming then that you're firmly in the keep camp of the scrap reform keep around an English breakfast.
100%.
And I wonder what's scrapping it outright, what saying, because there are a lot of moves to try and get we're all to give up meat, for example. I'm wondering, Matt, how much of an impact would that actually have on your industry? How much of an impact would that have on British producers?
Scrapping meat?
Scrapping meat, yes. If the British people just said, look, we're going to just get rid of meat altogether from our diets.
It would be catastrophic. I mean, you know, the agriculture, farming in this country, we produce some of the best quality meat in the world. Our beef is second to none. We have some of the best lamb, our chicken. I mean, okay, let's not really talk about chicken with avian flu at the moment because there's no free-range chicken around. But honestly, it would be a catastrophe if that happened. And I think there'll always be a place for meat. I think people probably will decide to eat meat less often, and make some other choices around health and also at the moment around cost, because given the cost of living has spiraled, the cost, we're seeing huge increases on food inflation in the business at the moment, and the cost of chicken, the cost of beef is quite scary and quite shocking. But in all honesty, if people decided to get rid of meat as part of their diet, it would be a catastrophe for British producers, farmers and butchers. And I would always advocate going and buying locally from a local butcher, because it's been well sourced and they care about what they're selling to you.
Yeah, Matt Thanthorpe there, I cannot say your name there, culinary director at Various Eateries Limited. Thank you very much for
Thanks, Darren.
time. Now, the US President Joe Biden has called Vladimir Putin a butcher and said he cannot remain in power. Let's remind ourselves of what he said.
For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
He made the impassioned speech in Warsaw after meeting with Poland's president and Ukrainian refugees, many of them, of course, in Poland. The Kremlin has responded, saying the people of Russia, not America, should choose its leader. Now, Laurie Laird is a US political analyst and joins me now. What do you make of these comments? Quite extraordinary, actually, and for the White House to come out almost immediately and say, oh, hang on a minute, folks, not sure that should have been said.
Honestly, Darren, you're so right. It felt like Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, walked these comments back minutes after they came out of Joe Biden's mouth. These were unscripted remarks, but it's a little bit conspicuous to me that the White House is letting it be known that these are unscripted remarks. It's difficult to get to the bottom of this. Let's look at the surface, though. It was, on the surface, a gaffe. America really has no way to stand up and say and call for regime change. America has been very clear that it is not calling for regime change, despite the fact that's exactly what the American government would like. So these were backed off, but I've been keeping my eye this morning on all of the Sunday morning news programs in the US, very similar format to what we see in the UK. And I've noticed that a number of Republicans who are fairly close, Democrats who are fairly close to the president are saying, this really wasn't a gaffe. This was Joe Biden speaking from the heart. This was not a message for America's NATO allies. This was a message for the Russian people themselves. So, in fact, it wasn't a gaffe. They're trying to present it as a bit of a stroke of genius. Joe Biden speaking from the heart, trying to show the Russian people that America's and NATO's objection is not to them, it's to the man who is their leader.
Yeah, but Laurie, a lot of people watching this will be saying, well, hang on a minute. I don't want boys and girls going out there and, being massacred. I don't want the Russians armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons to, obliterate the world, essentially, and feel quite anxious about the president of the free world saying freely such a gaffe like that. It's quite dangerous, isn't it?
You're bringing up a very good point, because this was only the most noticeable gaffe yesterday. There was another one a couple of hours before that when Joe Biden was speaking with U.S. troops and said something along the lines of, when you get there, you'll find out how brutal it is. So opening up the prospect of American boots on the ground in Ukraine, clearly that was walked back as well. But the point you're bringing up is a very good one. America is fairly united right now. And when I say that, I mean Democrats and Republicans, who are this is the most partisan government on the face of the earth right now. Republicans and Democrats have done a very good job so far in presenting a united face. I don't believe this is going to last. And you're absolutely right. If there is any prospect of American boots going on the ground there, any sort of sympathy for Ukraine will evaporate. And even if American boots aren't on the ground there, I suspect we're going to start to see a little bit of frustration in the American public as prices rise because of this conflict. Oil prices are rising. Petrol prices in the U.S. are rising. Petrol prices in the U.S., such a political issue. We are coming, I know it feels like we're always coming up to an election in the U.S., but the midterms are in November. And I suspect this bipartisan consensus will shatter the closer we get to November.
Laurie, I mean, to me, this is just a sign that President Biden, I'm afraid to say, great in his day, ripe for retirement now. I'm just putting it out there.
Well, look, he was gaffe prone when he was much younger. Make no mistake about that. And I think it is telling that the real face that we have seen on this conflict from America has been Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, who has held the ring reasonably well. And I think that there's probably a reason that we haven't seen much of Joe Biden. He doesn't present all that well. But I want to get back to, I think this is such a key issue in the U.S. I want to get back to these inflationary trends in the U.S. It will be so easy for Republicans to blame this on Joe Biden. Petrol prices, as I said, absolutely a motive in the U.S. And let me put this in perspective. A liter of petrol in the U.S., 93p. In the UK, 167, and we're still worried about it.
Indeed, indeed, and that speaks volumes, really, doesn't it? Laurie Laird, the US political analyst, thank you very much for your time. It's now 3:54, and of course, it's Mother's Day. Today is a day to treat your mum with a gift or your mum, or flowers, making the day memorable and special. Well, with some severe persuasion, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by my mum. Happy Mother's Day, ma'am. This was a really cheeky way of actually calling you because I haven't done it today.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation on the show.
Is being on GB News, on telly, on radio and online a Mother's Day experience you're likely to never forget?
Definitely. You can say that definitely, yes.
Have you been enjoying GB News? Because I know you're someone who has, let's say, not enjoyed the BBC's content over recent years. Do you think GB News is offering a really good alternative to perhaps mums like you who are really quite turned off by the BBC's woke output?
I think it's very refreshing. I don't actually watch news, but I do watch GB News because of the stories that's going on, the depression. But yes, it's very open, down to earth, and you get what you want. It's a brilliant show. Thanks.
Jackie, you couldn't, ma'am, you could not have put that any better. That was Jackie, my mother. Thank you very much and happy Mother's Day, ma'am. You've been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. This show is on every Saturday and Sunday at 2 p.m. But for now, I'll leave you with the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry for most parts, though cloud is spreading in from the east. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, there will be largely clear skies to the end of the day, although some cloud will linger around south coastal parts. It'll turn cloudier and colder next week. In the southeast, there'll be more cloud around. It should stay dry overnight, but there is a risk of dense fog patches forming. Cloud will spill across parts of Wales this evening. Eastern parts are likely to be cloudier than further west, where there will be still largely clear skies. The cloud will be thick across parts of the Midlands. This is how it will remain through the night, with 1 or 2 showers possible, though the majority of places will remain dry. Whilst there will be some lingering